All right. And hopefully I did this correctly and I don't have to keep changing my screens. But if for some reason I did it wrong, forgive me. So welcome everybody. And this is an opportunity to talk about our scenario planning toolkit. And we're thrilled to be able to offer it to you. First off, I did want to share with you where you can find this. Hold on a second here. So that if you're looking for it, it is here on the Dana website, delawarenonprofit.org. You can click here to where you find Centers of Excellence. It's located in here, but that link can take you right here to where you'll find the scenario toolkit itself. And a lot of the material that we are going to share with you is also separately available, along with, because we are using some Excel spreadsheets, we did also include here as a reference the how to use Excel or kind of a brush up on that. But today we're going to really focus on the toolkit itself and how we organized it. So come back here to my presentation. So today we'll take you through the toolkit. There's 3 sections to it. The first is awareness, being aware of your situation, understanding options and how to assess that, and some resources around that, and then wrapping up with some action items. Some of you may have attended a previous workshop where we talked about contingency planning, and that's really focused on addressing risk. Scenario planning is really going beyond the immediate and really thinking about alternate futures that may take place and how your organization then would respond to that. And so that's kind of like on a continuum. So you'll find that some of the resources that we're suggesting today are just as applicable if you were conducting contingency planning. The toolkit, as I mentioned, is broken up into these 3 areas: being aware, assessing, and acting. So the framework starts with those 3 things, but we wanted to also kind of ground ourselves in that because nonprofits are formed for the purposes of community benefit, we also want to make sure that we're grounded in mission and who we serve. And so we're going to start there. And then as we look at the awareness, assessment, and action, we've got kind of 2 dimensions to that. One is a financial dimension, and then the other is kind of that mission and programmatic dimension. So you'll see that kind of as we go through the toolkit. We do want to recommend that this is an activity that you do with others. Though it certainly can do it by yourself, it probably will not be as enriching. And this is where different brains, different perspectives and experiences can really add value, particularly as you're thinking creatively about what could be options and actions to take for the future. So in this toolkit, what we've attempted to do is give you a sense of how much time each of the sections will take. It's going to range based upon your organization and what information you have at your fingertips. So we do try to help you think about that data that you need to have. So the first section is about being aware, and we look at it in 2 dimensions, as I mentioned, thinking about what's happening on the ground and how that impacts your clients, being clear about who your clients are, what your intended outcomes are, and understanding your current cash position. That's one dimension. Then the other is looking at the external factors, which factors impact your mission the most. When could those factors impact your organization and how important they are to mission? So I'm going to take us out of here and actually take us to the toolkit itself. That's it here. Okay, here we go. And show you how this is structured. So you see here, the first is on the mission drivers, and try to kind of give you some prompts to think about your mission, your target audience, and your programs along with your health. And we have a questionnaire that we've developed. It's called the Scenario Planning Awareness Mission Driver Questionnaire. And again, these are just prompts to help kind of organize your thinking. And particularly if you're in a group where maybe you have some board members or you brought in a volunteer that might not have all of the insight and information that you have. This questionnaire is a great way to level set everybody so you're all kind of starting from the same page. So you see there's questions about your clients, and then we have questions about your financial position and your business model. And the reason why this is important is we want you to be aware of how where you are starting from. Are you starting from a position of strength? You've got 8, 9, 10 months of cash available to you that gives you a longer runway to make change. Or are you in a situation where you're looking at a very short-term amount of cash and your current situation is you basically have to make some changes very quickly. So those questions are there. Now, you might say to yourself, well, how then am I going to figure this out? Because we have our budget and we have our balance sheet, but how do I really understand what our cash position is? And that's where we have a couple of different resources for you. One is BDO, which is a national accounting firm, created these resources during the pandemic, and we've actually been meeting with them, and they're starting to think about different types of resources that could be used to financially assess. So here are a couple. So this one is called the BDO Liquidity Calculator. And what it does is it helps you get a quick sense out of the gate of how much cash you might have at the moment. And so it's very easy. If you choose to use this, you put in your date, how many months of your fiscal year. So let's pretend this is a calendar year. And then you can type in like how much cash do you have? And it's very easy to say, I've got $500,000 cash. And my average expenses are 350,000, which means right now with that run rate, I have about 7 months of cash. But you know what? I have this restricted grant of 150,000, and our board has set aside some funds that have been designated, so I really don't want to include that. And we've got some furniture and computers that are part of our assets. So in the end, when you net that out, I only have 2 months of cash. So a great resource for those of us that have restricted funds and unrestricted funds to very quickly get a sense of what our cash position is. Now, we might also be saying, okay, but when will I actually run out of cash? Because my money comes in, sporadically, or I might have a big event coming up. So how would I calculate that? And that's where we offer a simple cash flow projection toolkit that you can use. The way to read this is you put your starting cash balance in. We'll use that 500,000 again. You have your annual budget, and then you spread your money out for the year. So in this case, I've got a federal grant. I might get 125,000 up front, and then I'm going to get the second amount, and I've spread it out, and I can see down below how my cash is flowing in by month. And then I do the same with my expenses, and I can break these expenses out. I can change these columns so it's meaningful for your organization. And then at the bottom, it calculates how many months of cash you have at any given month. So in the case
Sheila,
of,
Sheila,
I'm
we're
yes,
so sorry to
not
interrupt.
seeing any of that.
I don't think we're seeing what you're
No.
seeing. I'm sorry to interrupt.
oh, goodness, thank you, AT. So you did not see either spreadsheet, or you saw one spreadsheet?
No, we didn't see the spreadsheet.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Let me come back here again. So can you see the spreadsheet now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, no, I'm going to go back real quickly. This was the liquidity spreadsheet. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so when I was referring to the liquidity and I was talking about that, it's where you see I have 7 months of cash in total based upon this calculation. But when I add in my restricted funds, it takes me down to 2 months of cash. So thank you, AT, for letting me know that. So this is the cash flow where what I've done now is I've put my cash of 500,000 in, and I've spread my annual budget by the months on how I think my money's going to come in, and also spread it by the months of how my expenses come in. And then you can see what your cash position looks like each month. If I lost my federal grant very quickly, take that out, I can then see how that's going to impact my cash and tell me how many months of cash I'm going to have as we flow in. Or if I say, well, I lost my federal grant, but I'm now going to add in a big event, and instead of 75,000, we're going to go really big. We got, Taylor Swift to come to our event. So I now have that. Or I could change that and say, I'm going to have one event, but I'm going to have a second event this year to try to cover some of my lost revenue. So this simple cash flow tool is a great way to see how your different scenarios will play out across your fiscal year. And many foundations want to see you do a cash projection for multiple years. You can very easily add in columns into this spreadsheet and make it 12 months or 18 months or 24 months. So it's also a great resource when you're applying to like a Longwood Foundation, or I think Welfare and Lafayette also are foundations that look to see that grant. So I'm going to stop there for a second to see if there are any questions on those two financial tools. All right. Yes, AT?
Sorry. My Zoom, I'm going crazy on a Friday. The BDO liquidity calculator, is that that's in the toolkit as well?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, everything that I'm going to share with you today, there's a link right in the toolkit that takes you to it. Or if you like later just want to go find that BDO calculator, you can find it on the website as well. So thank you for that question. All right, I'm going to come back to here. So we can, all right. So coming back to the PowerPoint, are you able to see the PowerPoint? The next set of resources are called the awareness resources. Oh, actually, let me stop here for a second. I wanted to show you one other thing that I think you'll like is, in addition to the scenario planning questionnaires and the budget, we also help provide some context around the different external factors. This, as you know, we're kind of operating in a very fluid environment. And so not everybody may be on top of all of the things that are happening. So we try to, in this toolkit, give some context around some of the issues. This is intended to be a living document. So as things change, for example, Congress just passed what they're calling the Big Beautiful Bill. And we're now starting, as we're learning more about what's in that budget that they've passed, we will probably revise the toolkit to give some context around there. So the intent is, again, if not everybody might have all the same information, we can at least give you some insight on where things are. And so if we make adjustments and changes to this toolkit, we will send a note out to everybody so that you know. Also, just a reminder that the National Council of Nonprofits is keeping track of a lot of this data as well. And so they're a great resource to go to if you're trying to kind of get insights. So in each section, you'll see that we provide some context on what the situation is, and we offer a suggestion on how you might want to rate the probability as well as the timing. And so we have again, a little template that you can reference that you can use to start to document the different issues. We have one around the economy, which a couple of weeks ago was definitely of great concern. I think it's still concerning, but at least we're not seeing the degree of wobbliness in the stock markets. But definitely for some of us, particularly if, let's say, we're in the middle of a construction or capital campaign, or we think about our donors, that could be certainly a concern. Policy changes related to DEIA. For certain organizations, this could be a really great issue for them based upon their mission area or populations they support. So we put some perspective there. And then there is other regulatory changes. There's so many. We just encourage you to think about those that could be impacting your organization. And then we did create another section for other. Might be that your organization works with the state of Delaware, and there is a cascading effect based upon what might be happening at the federal level, choices that the state might make that could impact you, for example. So we will do our best to continue to revise this and share more insights around what's happening. So now we've moved from being aware of the situation, both from our organizational perspective and from the external. This next section provides resources around how do you assess it? And one of them is a resource where it's literally just taking those mission drivers that you identified that are most impacted and those external factors and putting them on a simple grid so that you all can clearly see as a group what are those key areas of your mission, how they impact your beneficiaries, and how it impacts your organization and funding. And to what degree is it an important issue, and to what degree it's high or low probability. The intent here is to really focus the group and the thinking around scenarios on those things that are high probability and most important. And the reason is because usually you come up with 25 different things that could potentially impact your organization and the people you serve. And we want, we recommend that you focus on those that are most important. Hopefully that makes sense to folks. So coming back to the presentation. So in this assess area, we'll have two different dimensions, as I mentioned before. One is looking at program viability, and the other is looking at financial health. And so we have a resource called the Macmillan Matrix. I'm going to walk you through that in a second. And what it does is it's a tool actually that's been created a couple of years ago, and lots of consultants tend to reference this, but it looks at how your programs align with your mission, to the degree in which you have competitive strength, the way and the means in which it's easy for you to execute, but also for your clients to access, and whether or not there is options out there for you. So I'm going to pull that up. And so this again is a resource that you have. You can connect it through the toolkit, or you can find it on our website. And it starts with the definitions of each of these areas. So you're looking at your service or programs that maybe you've had over the years some scope creep, which, we've got somebody had a great idea. We decided to execute it, but it might not be really tight to our mission. From a competitive standpoint, the degree in which the organization has a stronger ability to actually get the funding resources need, perhaps relative to other agencies. Program attractiveness, how well is it, how is it easy for clients to get access to it? Is it easy to grow your base? Is it easy to execute? So that's a dimension. And then this alternative coverage is that how many organizations are providing similar comparable services to the same population. And the reason this is helpful is if you're in a situation where you have to prioritize your resources, or you are in a situation where maybe you've lost funding and you want to find ways to figure out how to perhaps redeploy your clients, this can help you think through that. And so the first page has examples, how to read and where you put your programs. And then we have a blank sheet of paper for you. So looking at this, do I have high program attractiveness and maybe low coverage? Do I have low coverage and low program attractiveness? So it allows you to kind of create that grid for your organization. So coming back here then, in this assess phase, we also then ask you to think about your financial risks, and we have a questionnaire for you as well. So we ask you some questions now that you know kind of your position and you start looking at these external factors. In what way will those factors impact your funding, your cash position, and it walks you through there. Now, this may be like, well, gee, how would these three different scenarios that we might be considering impact our financial position? And that's where we have a scenario tool. And I want to double check that you can actually see this on your screen. It's got yellow and black. Oh, Paulette, you have a question.
Real quick, I don't see where I access the matrix.
Oh, let me show you. Get back here. Here we go. Come up here. So in the tool, it's in program viability. I jumped ahead a bit, but right here you can see it here, and it's also on the website. So I probably should have shown this section to you first before I jumped into the Macmillan, because as we think about, you know, our options and how we address these external factors, looking at our program viability and in a couple of dimensions. So we have that mapping factors to mission drivers. Then we ask you a variety of questions. We have a program assessment checklist. We have the Macmillan matrix that allows you to start to frame out and prioritize your programs. And then we ask some other questions around your beneficiaries and to what degree they're impacted and how your programs could benefit them. And also considerations around partnerships. So in this assessment section, we're trying to give you questions, prompts to help you think differently, perhaps, about how you go to market, whether or not you have opportunities for partnership, and then how to evaluate those partners. Excuse me. And then also in this section is assessing your financial and operational risk. And once again, we have that simple cash flow projection sheet that you could use. We also, though, do have a more complex one that has multiple tabs in it, which is designed to help you if you're not used to spreading your budget across the years. You can actually, excuse me, it's just all of a sudden losing my voice. You can use this tab to kind of put in last year's numbers, or you could use this year's numbers and then create next year's numbers. So we have a guide for this, and we will be developing a little video on how to use it because it is a little more complex, but it is another kind of cash flow resource that you can use. So I'm going to jump to the scenario modeling toolkit tool. Wanted to make sure, can you all see this? It's a spreadsheet with yellow on it. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to double check. So here's an example where we have our budgets that let me start with. It starts with instructions, and we like to thank our partner, Montana Nonprofit Association, who actually worked with us on this tool. So in the tabs, you're going to see yellow sections, and that's where you enter the data. And you have one tab for revenue, and you have one tab for expense. And then your third tab actually kind of creates the financial results from your different scenarios. So you might start with, okay, what's the probability that our federal contract that we have is going to go away? So when you look at this tool, you can actually type in over here your different sources of revenue. So if you had federal contract one, but maybe you have a second, you've got actually a federal grant. And then you have a fundraising event, and then you have your program, your annual budget that you have. And then you're asked this question: is this a variable revenue or is it a fixed? And what that means is if you are getting revenue as you perform, so on a federal contract, perhaps you get reimbursed after you've had the expenses, or if it's a program where you're getting fees as you execute the program, that's considered variable revenue. If you're getting one-time funding, like say a grant where you're getting that money at once, or I consider a fundraising event kind of like a one-time event, we call that fixed. And so you actually come here and you can change it to fixed or variable. And what it does is it changes the columns over here. So in the case of my federal grant, it's reimbursable, so I called it variable. And then it's asking me, what's the worst case scenario that I could potentially lose it? And let's say in this scenario, I actually have gotten about 75% of my grant, and then I lost the rest. So I could put 75%. I could put 10% is my, worst case scenario. My federal grant, because it's fixed, it's asking me what's the likelihood that I'm going to receive it. And let's say I actually got notice that I'm not going to get it at all. So it's a less than 50% probability. My fundraising event is also fixed, but we've had such great response that I'm actually feeling really confident about that event. And my new programs, well, the good news is that that's really not impacted at all. So what is the worst case percentage of total possibility? I think it's more like 75% is my worst case. So if you notice over here in the red, my revenue scenarios have been changing. And you have a section for earned revenue, and then you have a section for contributed revenue. Oh, there's the federal grant. Similar, you can put your list here. Here's my grant and aid. Grant and aid, they said, probably should think about maybe we might not get as much as we had last year. So you can indicate that. My individual gifts is fixed also because we get end of year. The economy's been a little tough. I might also make that 75%. So then you have your total revenue solutions at the bottom here. On the expense side, it's similar. There's a section that starts with staff, and you can choose to break it out. In this case, I use it as an example of my federal grant and my federal contract staff are basically covered by those. So if I lose that funding, maybe I'm making an assumption I'm losing all of it, some of it, a portion of it. Or it could be that because of this situation, we've actually identified a new program that actually does have federal funding tied to it. So I may be considering that I might only have to replace or lose a portion of my staff. So thinking through those scenarios helps you decide what your financial component is. The next section is around occupancy. And in this case, I just put a lease, but if you have facilities, other types of expenses, you can put them here. And then you have other types of expenses. And this again can be customized to whatever your particular way in which you categorize your expenses. I put program materials here, other admin, fundraising expense. And then you enter in the percent that you think that you might have to reduce it by in your different scenarios. And then finally, you end up with your analysis that helps you get a sense of, if I went down this pathway, what would it look like? And you can see that the best case scenario, things are looking good. But as we move into moderate and worst case, that's where we find some trouble. And then you can go back as a group to estimate what that might look like for you if you had some different assumptions. Any questions there? I know it's a lot. All right, I'm going to jump back to screen and back to the toolkit. So as we're looking at these different scenarios and we think about our cash position, we wanted to offer a way to start to think about, okay, what could be some action items that we take based upon our program viability and our uh, position from a financial standpoint. So on the financial standpoint, we kind of looked at three buckets, being in a crisis stage, being in a concerning stage, and being in an opportunity stage. Crisis stage, we categorize that as less than 3 months of cash on hand. And certainly that's in the sense that if you know your funding is going away and you only have 3 months of cash, we think that at that point you should be really focused on contingency planning and risk mitigation. If you have 6 or more months of cash, it's concerning, but that still gives you 6 months of runway before you have to perhaps make some choices. And so what could you do now? But more importantly, what could you do that could change your trajectory 6 months from now? And certainly in that position where you've got more than 6 months of cash, there is that opportunity to perhaps pivot, to look at partnerships, to think differently about how you might deliver your services. So we already talked about program viability. So that's where we get to the next section, which is about action. And we looked at kind of layering your crisis and your concerning opportunity stage from the financial standpoint with your program viability, looking at it from a low, medium, and high, and intersected them with these kind of action items. So if you have low opportunity for cash and your programs are not unique or competitive, this may be a time to either look at, could you just, contract or divest certain programs, get rid of them so that you can focus on those things that you're really good at. Are there partners, or is there somebody even that maybe that program could transition to someone else? If you have good cash position, you've got some core programs that are really strong, is this an opportunity potentially to grow? Is it an opportunity to look at partners in a different way where maybe they are coming in and being part of your program? And we offer then a variety of resources based upon what you might think as an action. So if you're thinking about, we're in a good position, maybe there's some organizations that are not, we might want to reach out and start to have conversations about whether or not we could integrate together, partner together, or maybe even acquire. And then on the flip side, if things are looking challenging, is this the right time to transition the clients that you serve to someone else and exit the market, which is a very difficult decision to make, but one that we would hope that you and your board would look at as a way to try to, again, transition out and transition assets to another organization. And in each section, we've offered some resources so that you can help the folks in your group think through what those options could look like. We recognize that these are a lot of different types of resources and tools, and you may have questions. And so we did include Earl's email address that you can reach out if you do have some questions. We are in the process of trying to set up a way that we could get folks who had quick questions, they could reach out to us so that we could help answer them and walk you through them. And as I mentioned, we are also continuing to look at what the situation is and also think about what are some other helpful resources that might support you as you're having to think through these different and kind of difficult considerations. And we would really value if you have ideas or thoughts or say, you know what, this would really help me. We'd love to hear them because a lot of these resources, we kind of reconstituted them from COVID, but we've also recognized that this is a new situation and it's very the way in which each of us have to address it is going to be different because of the different types of issues that are emerging with so much change that is happening. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have questions, comments, any feedback. Paulette.
So I understand the templates of the 3 A's, but buried in them are these other templates. So if the group is 4 or 5 people at large, would you recommend that some of those subsidiary templates be prepared prior to, or collectively should the group be doing this at the same time, all the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that like with the financial data, that might be something that you, or if you have somebody who helps you with your accounting and finance, maybe you prepare that ahead of time. The questions around mission, around your beneficiaries, questions around partnerships, I think those are good to do in a group because again, you have folks with different perspectives that can think differently. And then when you start to consider those alternate scenarios, doing them together would be good. But the financial activities itself and that analysis, that probably could be done with, your finance person or your accounting person and yourself, let's say, and bring that to the group. It might be more efficient.
Okay, thanks.
Sheila, does Dana offer resources? I know, I'm sorry about that. I'm thinking ahead for going through this exercise, someone to facilitate this exercise with a board. So,
Yes.
My controller could gather the run rates and the work, the work, I'm sorry. Very distracting.
All that financial
7 things
stuff,
going
right?
on. All the financial stuff, yeah. But I think to have the board sit and go through this is going to require someone to facilitate, to ask the question. So I'm wondering, does Dana have that kind of facilitation available?
Yes, we do. At this point, we also have, unfortunately, it's for nonprofits that are in Southern Delaware, but we received a grant that can cover about 75% of the cost for Southern Delaware organizations. And then the Delaware Community Foundation has a Meet the Moment grant that is designed for that purpose. So that if you needed a facilitator, or in some cases, if your facilitation is done and the decision is you want to have conversations with 2 other organizations about partnership, you might want to bring in a facilitator to help in that conversation, or you might need legal guidance, let's say, if you were considering an MOU. We are trying to see if we can secure some additional funding that we could offer to anyone, facilitation support. But for now, we would need to charge a little fees just to be transparent. But several of us, we have several of our consultants do scenario planning work. Also, some of them have mergers and acquisition background. Some of them help facilitate conversations around partnerships. So Earl and his team have been able to kind of identify folks that can help support you in that way.
Okay, so Errol, would you be the contact if my board says, yes, this looks great tool, we want more, we want to do a day planning with senior leadership and board, you could arrange that?
Yes.
Super.
Yep. I'm the
Thank
one
you.
to reach out.
I have a question just to follow up on the previous two. Would you recommend, I'm just imagining if I ask our board to go through a 12-page document, they're going to be like, AT, this is.
Yeah, no, I
But
wouldn't
I'm just
recommend.
wondering, like, but a small, like, what would, what is ideal and what is doable? I'm kind of trying to be in
Sure.
that middle ground. Do you think that this would be an exercise to do maybe just with the executive, the executive committee, or does it really need to be something that everybody is on the same page with, and I should push for the full group?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to reflect on for your organization. I'm working with an organization right now where they formed an ad hoc committee. And it's made up of the executive director, another key staff member, and then the board chair, and then 2 other board members. And so they are meeting kind of outside of the board, and we went through this process where we started with that awareness assessment, and then we're now holding a board retreat to walk the board through what the committee has come up with so far, to kind of get input from the board at this retreat, do a little bit more broader scenario planning, and then that group will go back off. And based on those scenarios, they may bring in then experts on what they're trying to do. So so it's kind of a hybrid where small group work, but then pull the board in for just kind of like strategic planning, right? When you think
Yeah.
about strategic planning, you might have a smaller group kind of lead the process.
One last question. Do you have a ballpark of what if we do not receive funding, but we decide to work to, engage Dana in this, just a ballpark of what the fee would be?
Earl, I'm gonna turn that over to you if you have that number.
I mean, I will say it's going to vary simply because, the larger and more complex the organization is, the more pieces there are to figure out in the puzzle.
Mhm.
I would say in general, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood, just to do the scenario planning piece. I would say probably in the neighborhood of anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000, depending on the organization, how big it is, how complex it is, what information you already have.
Thank you.
And if it was, Earl, like a day board facilitation, what does that typically range?
Well, like a 1 day facilitation would probably be in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000.
Right. A lot depends on how much advance work you want us to do to support preparing for that. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you. First of all, thank you for this presentation. We're just about to launch a strategic plan. I'm coming up on just 1 year being here. We did some scenario planning at the DCH during COVID, and all of that data is now completely out of date. It's amazing, even 3 years, how much can change. And this is really timely because there were some funding sources that we had that were rescinded because of federal funding cuts. My question is, if we were to go for this kind of meet the moment initiative, and this is probably similar to the question AT was posing, could we work into the scope of our strategic planning this, I think it makes sense, kind of financial modeling and sustainability planning for some key program areas that I know the organization is committed to, but funding is so dynamic right now in all of the work that we do that's focused around the DEIA initiatives, so and environmental. So we're kind of hit on both ends. Would you propose or suggest that be dovetailed as part of the strategic plan or after the plan is done? I mean, what in terms of timing do you think the financial modeling that you're suggesting here makes sense?
I would do it before, during, and after. The beginning is, do we know what our current financial model looks like and what our current situation in? And then when you think about strategic planning, in some ways, scenario planning is part of the strategic plan process anyway. So as if you were looking at direction A or direction B in your strategic plan, what would be the financial requirements for that? And then certainly when you're done, I always encourage a strategic plan to include that if these are our 5 strategic outcomes over the next 5 years, these are the resources we're going to need, and it's going to cost this much. So these are fabulous tools that you could use for that as well.
Okay.
And I think, Earl, you may have gotten some requests already where folks
And
were.
we're actually working with a couple of organizations that are getting ready to apply for the Meet the Moment, to do that, to sort of look
Okay.
at doing a combination of strategic planning and scenario planning in conjunction with one another. I don't want to say in parallel because they're actually braided together, but Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, and one will kind of help the other. And yeah, of course, at the end of the strategic plan, our hopes and aspirations are to launch a major fundraising initiative. All of that will need to be informed by, certainly some of the financial tools that you guys have provided here, which is awesome. So I'd love to do a follow-up with either you, Earl, or Sheila, just to pick your brain a bit more about this proposal.
Yeah.
Sure.
Feel
And you
free to reach out.
Yeah, reach out to
Thanks.
Earl. One thing it's kind of top of mind is I was thinking what we have seen with some of the departments as they're reframing what's going to be acceptable for the things they fund. Any way that you can position the work you're doing that has an economic benefit seems to be safe. So even when we think about working with populations that we would typically have described as marginalized or underserved, I'm starting to see language like underinvested, or to, economic mobility. And I hate to be so superficial, it seems like, but that is the nature right now of how it seems that some of these opportunities may emerge. So we know that the federal government is still going to fund things, but they're clearly starting to prioritize it more in ways in which will advance economic benefit more so than focusing on certain populations, because it seems that the administration perceives that to be more discriminatory because it's resources that are going to certain populations. So as you're exploring scenarios, just thinking about maybe sometimes it's just how we are framing the story.
Yeah, that's really excellent feedback. It's weird times we are living in, but we could definitely make a case in economic development, certainly through our programs. So
Yeah, I think every one of us can. And we actually are exploring how we might be able to, that won't happen in the next week or two, but how could we help Delaware nonprofits tell that story better, right? Like Arts, for example, has a really good calculator that they use to talk about economic impact. But even something as simple as looking at the investment that you make in local community, the number of jobs that you create, the way in which other people can benefit because your organization exists, all are very positive stories and ones that can resonate with our government partners.
thank you so much.
Sure, great questions. Any other questions that you have? And certainly feel free to reach out to us if you are not sure again about like, okay, how do we use that resource? We are going to try to record little how-to videos. That'll be next. And then we are continuing to meet with BDO because they are working on some other resources nationally, and then we will make them available. And as I said, certainly let you all know. And take advantage of that Meet the Moment opportunity. For those of you in Southern Delaware, if you'd like to circle back with us to learn more about what we could offer there that provides some financial support there, we'd be happy to help orient that to that. So that's what I had today. It was really to walk you through this toolkit, make you feel hopefully feel a little more comfortable using it. And Tiffany dropped in the box in the chat a little survey. So please give us feedback. I felt like I was even clunkier this time than I was last time walking around those spreadsheets. So it's a lot of information, but we wanted to at least give you a sense of what's available to you. All right. Well, listen, I hope you all are able to take some time for yourselves this weekend and enjoy the holiday, and then we'll see you sometime next week or in the future. Thank you, everybody.